With just about 2 days to go for the end of 2024, we finally have one team in the ICC World Test Championship final, and that is the Proteus. South Africa survived a very testing match against Pakistan in Centurion, and because of that now, despite Mohammad Abbas's sensational spell of 6 wickets, South Africa managed to survive that, chase down 148, and because of that now, they are the first team to enter the WTC final at Lord's. So that is done now. We all know who the first team is, that's the Proteus. Now, who will be the other team that will join them? Now, technically, if Pakistan had won 2-0 versus South Africa, then India, Australia and Sri Lanka now could have had a mathematical chance. But now it's boiled down to just India, Australia, the 2 tests, and the 2 versus Sri Lanka. Although for Sri Lanka, that last series in the WTC cycle now has that much relevance. It doesn't have relevance. It's very vital for Australia because after the win that South Africa now have had, they have gone to 66.67 percentage points, meaning they cannot be eliminated. So they are the first team to qualify. Australia remain in second position, but if they win Melbourne, they'll take a big step towards WTC final qualification. India are third, New Zealand are fourth, Sri Lanka now mathematically also cannot make it to the WTC final because they needed Pakistan to beat South Africa 2-0. Now that has not happened. So, looking at the entire thing now, only one spot remains. India versus Australia, Australia versus Sri Lanka are virtual knockouts. India versus Australia for both are a virtual knockout. For Australia versus Sri Lanka, it's a backup. If Australia don't do well in Sri Lanka, they'll be eliminated. Now, what are the permutations and combinations heading into the final cricket day on 30th December? Because only 3 scorelines are possible in the Border Gavaskar Trophy. 2-1, 3-1 for either India or Australia, or 2-2. No other scoreline is possible. Now, what will be the situation? If India lose Melbourne and Sydney, they are eliminated. If India lose Melbourne and draw in Sydney, 1-2, then they will need their other neighbor, Sri Lanka's help. They couldn't get any help from Pakistan, they will then need Sri Lanka's help. Now, let's look at the winning. Let's assume winning, win, draw, loss we have already explored. What if India win both Melbourne and Sydney? Then you need not have anybody's help. India versus South Africa final at the WTC in Lord's confirmed for June. So that is the thing. If India win the BGT 3-1, then India are through to the final. But what if India wins 2-1, the final test in Sydney is also drawn. If India win in Melbourne or if it's a draw in Melbourne, what happens then? Australia should not win 2-0 versus Sri Lanka. That is the key caveat in this entire thing. Now remember, all these assumptions are not taking into account over-rate offences. Over-rate offences, if that happens, points are docked, then the entire calculation changes. This is assuming no further over-rate deductions. Australia should not win 2-0 in Sri Lanka. If SL win 1-1, 2-0 versus Australia, then India will qualify. Australia basically should not win 2-0. If Sri Lanka win 1-1, 2-0 versus Australia, then India will go through. What if the BGT is level 2-2? India will be through if SL beat Australia 2-0. If SL versus Oz is 1-1, then India will be eliminated. That's the fine margins. If the BGT is tied 2-2, then India will be through if SL beat Australia 2-0. But even if Australia win one more test at Galle, then they will be through. India cannot afford Sri Lanka to concede a single test against Australia. What if Australia win the BGT 2-1? Now that is also a possibility. I am not taking into account 1-1 because we do not know the Melbourne test result as yet. Tomorrow you could see a decisive result. If it's 1-1, then we'll have a different calculation at that point. If Australia win 2-1, then they have to avoid a 2-0 series loss in Sri Lanka. That's the only way that they will qualify for the WTC. If Australia lose 1-2, then they have to win 2-0 against Sri Lanka. If they don't do that, they're eliminated. So, in this way now, South Africa have ensured that all the other teams, even mathematically now, stand no chance. It's now a simple direct shootout as to who wins which series. Sri Lanka versus Australia, India versus Australia. The problem with India is after Melbourne, there is only one test. But for Sri Lanka, for Australia, there are 3 tests. 1 in Sydney, 2 in Galle. So that's why now by January or by January end, January first week or January end, we will know who our WTC finalists are. That is the way the nature of the beast is. Many people are calling it a fraudulent system because South Africa, if you look at it, won series against West Indies, Bangladesh, and if you look at it against Sri Lanka. But they have drawn against India, lost to New Zealand. They are on their way to winning against Pakistan also. Do they deserve to be in the final? That's a different debate altogether. So thank you so much, folks, for joining us for this video. Subscribe to Sports Today for all the latest news and analysis.